This is a tutorial on how to do a transfer using CitraSolv as the solvent. So previously we did transfers where we kept the transfer pretty much the same as what the original image was. Now we're going to do a transfer where we basically use CitraSolv to dissolve the ink off the page and then transfer it in an abstract texture. This works particularly well with National Geographic magazines and magazines that have that same type of paper, that kind of glossy paper. Now, this is a trial and error process like all transfer processes, so some magazines may not work well, so you're going to just have to experiment. If in doubt, start with National Geographic because they work really well. So what you're going to need is an image to transfer. So I just tore a page out of this National Geographic. So it's this advertisement. You're going to need a surface to transfer onto, so I'm just going to do this in my sketchbook. You're going to need the CitraSolv. So CitraSolv. So again, this is basically made from oranges, so it's essential orange oil, and it's used as a solvent for cleaning things, but it works really well as a transfer process. It also smells wonderful. You're also going to need a glass or a metal container, not plastic, because the CitraSolv will eat through the plastic over time. And then you're going to need some way to apply the CitraSolv, so I just have a cheap brush. Finally, you're going to need something to burnish with. I usually just use the back of the brush, but you could use something else. So you can burnish with, a pencil, for example, or you may specifically have a burnisher. The back of a spoon works well. I'm going to use the back of the brush. I find that the end of the brush works really well as a burnisher. So you're going to begin by just saturating the page that you're going to transfer the ink from. So just however you want to do that, you can do it with a brush. You can put some in a little spray bottle if you have a spray bottle. Spray it on. You can kind of flick this on with the brush. Once you get some CitraSolv on the image that you're going to transfer, let it sit for a moment or two to kind of dissolve the ink. And then we're going to crinkle this up into a ball. And again, let it sit like that for a while. So maybe for a minute or two. Okay, so that's been a couple of minutes. I'm just going to check to see if the ink is starting to move around. So unwad the paper wad. You can kind of see that the ink is beginning to dissolve. So then we're going to take that and we're going to put it on the substrate that we intend to transfer it to, so in this case my sketchbook. Put that face down. So the other thing that you may need is some tape to tape that down in place. So I have some green painter's tape. This is just to keep it from inadvertently moving while you're transferring it. You can transfer it without tape if you're careful, but I always like to tape it down. You're going to get your burnisher. I'm going to use the back of the brush. And you're just going to burnish just like we did previously with the first example. Now in this case, we want it to be kind of abstract. So you can intentionally leave broken areas so you know where you don't burnish everything. You kind of check it as you go along. So I would just lift up, and at any point that you feel like you have something that you're interested in, then you can stop there or continue burnishing. If you feel like you're not getting enough ink coming off, you can always stop and add more CitraSolv and then let it sit and dissolve the ink and then continue the process. So it just depends on what you want. So what we're getting is really abstract there. You're not really seeing much of the original imagery. Maybe I'll try to get, that part is the lady's neck and hands. Up here in this corner is her face. So maybe I'll add some more CitraSolv, and maybe that part I'll try to get more clear, just because I think that'll be interesting. So in this case, I'm just going to add it straight to the paper. Now when you do this, instead of dissolving it through the back of the paper, you tend to get a more mushy effect than when you add it and let it absorb through the back of the paper. I just think with this particular paper, it's not going to absorb through very well. Could be wrong. This is also going to move some of that ink that's already transferred around a little bit, you know, and make it a little bit more blurry. Okay, so then I'll get that. And then just burnish. Sometimes it's helpful to burnish in several different directions. Be careful that you don't tear through the back of the page. I've had that happen before, just because you know you're using relatively sharp point on a wet paper, so it could be easy to get a little over aggressive and tear through. Okay, so let's check that. That looks pretty cool. Can't quite really tell that that's the face because it's smeared the ink a lot, but I still think that's a cool effect, right? Maybe I'll try to get a little bit here as well. So I'm just going to add some more of the CitraSolv. In this case, I'm going to add it straight onto the magazine front. I'm going to change my pattern. So I'm doing it in a circle. Obviously, you know, the pattern that you burnish in potentially shows up in the final result. Okay, now I'm not getting a lot of color in this because of the original colors. You know, it's dependent upon the original colors in the original magazine print, and this print was pretty dark with just some flesh tones and then dark background color. So I'll take that loose, and then that's fairly abstract looking. Now in this case, that was the intention. I didn't want it to be very realistic. I didn't want it to appear very close to the original image that I started with. So I wanted it to be kind of an abstract texture. And maybe in, you know, maybe do some experiments like this, and you don't have to know what you're going to do with them, but maybe in your final artwork, this ends up being something that you use as a texture in the background, or maybe as a texture overlay using Photoshop's blending modes. So that's basically the end of this tutorial on how to make abstract transfers.